Hello everybody and welcome to another video. So I've been poring over my black books to pick a legion for the Horus Heresy, and I've now finally decided on one. So let's jump in, let's have a chat, what I've got planned, how I'm going to do it, because I want to do this a little bit different than before. Yes, so if you've obviously been watching my content, you'd have seen that I've been talking a little bit about the Horus Heresy, getting back into the Horus Heresy, playing more games of the Horus Heresy. The Horus Heresy is definitely a very different game to Warhammer 40k 10th edition, and I am going to be doing a video talking about the two, definitely the similarities and the differences and everything else regarding the two games, so keep an eye out for that video in the very near future. But regarding the Horus Heresy and getting back into it, I wanted a legion that I ended up having dabbled in before during first edition. Not that that's actually very hard. And obviously I had settled on definitely going to be doing a traitor army, because my 40k army is a loyalist army in the form of the Blood Angels. So I had I went through my black book in regards to what I was going to do, went through different sort of armies, army lists, themes, narratives and everything else, because I think one of the things that the Horus Heresy gives you over 40k is definitely more of a stronger narrative feel, and I really wanted that. And some of my choices, my biggest choice was definitely down to the colour palette of the army itself, the painting, and a few Black Library novels which really sort of sparked my interest, and I am currently re-listening to on Audible right now, which is cool. So the actual project itself, I wanted to make sure that I was doing some things a little bit differently, which was kind of like learning new skills in the hobby aspect of trying to paint that, and looking at a couple of content creators that are big inspiration for this sort of way of painting. So you know what I'll do, either way, let's just say what legion I'm going to be doing. So the legion that I'm going to be doing obviously is the Night Lords. There you go. So yes, I settled on the Night Lords. It was quite there was definitely a lot. Like I said, it was about 5 legions definitely in contention. The Death Guard were definitely up there, the Thousand Sons were definitely up there, and the Sons of Horus were kind of sort of floating around the periphery, and the Night Lords were always a firm favourite and firm sort of forerunner at the front of everything. And the main reasons why I've picked the Night Lords is, one, they are super cool. Like, narratively, the army is amazing, super cool army. I love the Night Lords trilogy, which I'm currently listening on to Audible by Aaron Densky-Baldwin. It's such a great set of books, and 10th Claw and the Soul Hunter and everyone else involved in that story is just so good. And it's got nice little snippets of the Horus Heresy and the Legion, which is really quite nice, and really gets the narrative juices and creative juices thinking. Now, as for the army itself, there's a couple of interesting rights of war that the Night Lords have that are kind of cool. Like Swift Blade is kind of nice. It gives you some pretty cool choices. But obviously, if you're going to pick one of the rights of war for the Legion, you're mainly going to go into Terror Assault. Why would you not want to be taking Terror Squads as troop choices, and on Night Raptors as troop choices as well? Forcing your opponent to fight in the dark where you excel is just, is a no-brainer. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way you have to play this army. The one good thing about Horus Heresy is it has multiple of rights of war which you can take. And my idea is I want to do more of a drop pod, sort of maybe assault-based army. Really lean into that close combat aspect of the Legion, and sort of have some really cool units, some assault squads, some Night Raptors, and maybe a couple of infiltrating terror squads, just to cause a little bit of problems, rather than ultimately going down the route of tacticals and stuff like that. Although I do like the humble tactical marine, is always kind of cool. Obviously, there is a lot of rumours in the ether and in the warp floating around right now about what the Horus Heresy is about to get. Is there a new edition next year? I don't think so. But there is definitely new marks of armour coming. The big rumour right now is Mark II. Does the Night Lords look good in Mark II, or would they look better in Mark III and Mark VI? I prefer the Mark III and Mark VI, although the Mark II may look good, but well, let's have a look. There's definitely things like Mark V and Mark IV on the horizon. You know, the rumours are screaming out for them as well, which is kind of going to be interesting. As I'm sure we'll see at some point next week when we get the preview, because they've mentioned the Horus Heresy. But as for my the way I want to do the army now, I would like, now I can paint very much like the heavy metal style. I can base coat, I can, you know, blend in my colours with my glazes and everything else for my shadows, and bring up my highlights and edge highlight and all of that good stuff. And it's time consuming and it's cool. But I've been watching a lot of painting videos for the Horus Heresy to help me pick that legion, and a lot of the content creators that I've been watching are some people like Rob at Meadows Miniatures, Cult of Paint, Richard Gray with some of his stuff. And one of the things that kind of sort of stood out a lot is the use of an airbrush. Now, I don't have an airbrush. I haven't had an airbrush for well over 10 years. And I don't really use an airbrush. Well, I say I don't have one. I have a little, like, sort of little, like, you know, the little nail varnish compressor that you kind of, like, kind of only lasts for like 30 minutes before you need to recharge it, and a little sort of cheapy airbrush, and I kind of figured that I'm not really going to be able to do what I want to do with that. So one of the things I want to do is learn how to airbrush properly. I kind of like the idea of airbrushing all of the colours on my base coat, my highlights, and then coming in with some glazes to bring down the shadows, and then adding a little bit of sort of edge highlighting, and then doing the whole oil washing thing. The oil washes is something I dabbled in many years ago, but kind of never really sort of went into it. In those days, you know, the paints weren't great, and you kind of put oil paints anywhere near, and I may be using the wrong methylated spirits or the wrong sort of thinners, but it was generally just take the paint off, and I kind of was like, no, too much hassle, not going to be doing it. So I'm going to be, I've learned kind of listening to what like Meadows is been saying, Henry over at Cult of Paint, and looking at what they're doing, I figured that I could probably do some of this, something similar, but adding in my own sort of style and everything else into that, and hopefully come up with a very interesting, unique project. And obviously, YouTube is now actually paying paying the channel, so I figured using some of my YouTube money that I'm going to be getting shortly to invest in an airbrush. And again, I'm pretty sure that if anyone knows, like, I've looked on Amazon for different bundles and different packages, and I'm kind of sort of torn now. Do I get one with or without a tank? Do I need a tank? Do I not need a tank? So I'm sure if you guys are airbrush connoisseurs, you could probably let me know in the comments below of what kind of airbrush compressor / with or without a tank I need. Now, I obviously know that straight away that the airbrush I'm going to get is not great, but I do have one here that I'm probably going to be able to use, and it is really mainly going to be using as getting that base coat transition down at the start, and then I will go back to normal conventional means of using a brush, sort of blending those highlights, getting the edge highlights in, and then sort of like, you know, maybe sort of bringing it up a little bit more before applying decals and doing the oil washing and the sort of ultra matte varnish for the end and all that kind of stuff, which I have this stuff and I generally just use this as a brush on varnish rather than using an airbrush. So maybe it kind of might change how I approach my modeling in general. So I'm looking forward to learning new skills while I do it. The general size of the army, I'm aiming for 3,000 points. Am I going to include Conrad Kurz to that? Probably at some point. Now, he's a pretty cool character. He is Batman. Sevatar is definitely going to be on the list. The Terminators are definitely going to be on the list. But I kind of would like a more sort of infantry-based, assault-based type army. That might not necessarily be the way to go, but it's the kind of theme and narrative that I would like to go for the start. Obviously, with the Horus Heresy, the idea is eventually you can move into tanks and sort of transports and all of that kind of stuff. But right now, I think that's the kind of army I want to go for. It was one of the biggest factors why I didn't choose the Death Guard. The Death Guard are very much into their heavy weapon squads and being able to move and fire as though they're stationary. And as cool as that sounded, I was kind of limited to what I wanted to do, because I was like, right, I want to lean into this, but I also want to have drop pods and sometimes maybe ground transports, and that rule doesn't work if you disembark. That kind of was like, oh, I don't like that, because that's kind of forcing you to take a pure infantry army with maybe tanks supporting them. And I was like, no, I want the transport element to the army. Because one of the things that 10th edition currently with Space Marines you don't really get to see is a lot of drop pods, because drop pods are 10 man, and Primaris Marine squads are really coming in units of 5. You can't add a unit. If you take a unit of 5 guys and add a character to it, then you're not really using the full space of the vehicle, because it only holds 10 models. And I'm like, I don't really like that. I would rather have like 11 in that drop pod, or 9 and a character, but you can't do that in 10th edition anymore. Whereas in the Horus Heresy, I can. And I can also go for things like Dreadclaws, or even a big drop pod, if I really want to bring something megally big, for the funds of it. So yeah, that's generally the idea. But I want to sort of look into it. It's going to be, I'm hopefully going to get I've got a couple of Mark 6 guys spare. I'm going to build them up and do a little bit of a test there. Maybe try out this airbrush that I have to see if I can get like the base layers and everything down. And generally just continue watching more tutorials and of the whole airbrushing, oil washing, and all of that sort of method of doing the armies, and sort of go, right, let's see if I can do that, and then probably get an airbrush. I'm sure you guys could probably give me some good advice in regards to the compressor or the tank, if I need that, in the comment section. But yeah, it's going to be super cool. I'm actually kind of excited. It's going to be. I'm not expecting to get any form of games this year with the Horus Heresy, but it's definitely going to be something to work on next year. If a new edition does come, I don't think it is. It doesn't make sense for them to roll out a new edition in 3 years. Not when the specialist games, the games design studio is so small. Regarding the other one, the other main studio, and they've got things like like the Old World and Blood Bowl and all of that kind of things, and Lord of the Rings to do. It kind of doesn't make sense that they're able to sort of roll out a big new edition. I don't necessarily think it'll be a new edition per se. It could well just be another big box set, same rule book and everything else, but kind of sort of move into a new phase of the heresy, rather than giving us a couple of new campaign books, and maybe potentially moving into that sort of Siege of Terror sort of element and era. We've just had Beta Garmin campaign book, which is at the last big sort of campaign inside the Civil War before the solar system itself. So maybe that's what that was. Maybe that was like the ending of that sort of thing. But I hope it isn't. I really hope we're not moving into the solar system and the Siege of Terror yet, because there's a lot of cool things that they've not done yet from first edition, like the Thramox Crusade between the Night Lords and the Dark Angels hasn't been touched. Sigilus Prime hasn't been touched with the Blood Angels against the demons. And these are kind of campaign books that they should kind of do before we go anywhere near Terra. So yeah, and maybe like even re-releasing the older campaign books that we had before, the black books, updating them to the new second edition, and then putting them back out again as like the Beta Garmin campaign book that we already have, which would probably be a better idea. But that's completely, we're moving into a completely different topic right now, so I'll keep that for a different video. But Legion is picked. Lots of work to do. I will be writing lists now of getting a sort of list, probably in for a 1,500 point list, and then start building towards that, and then sort of slowly expand that to a 3,000 point army. But yeah, it's going to be super cool. I'm really looking forward to it. Super excited. I love the Assault Marine models. I love the Mark III. Terror Squads are going to be fun to sort of convert. Getting a little bit of sculpting in with some like flayed skin and stuff like that would be kind of interesting. And just generally learning how to use an airbrush properly, and oil washes and all of that good stuff, and having definitely that Horus Heresy type of painting style, which is what you kind of see a lot in the scene, which is going to be a fun sort of hobby aspect to do. So yeah, if you obviously want to follow on with what I'm going to be doing with this, because I'm going to be charting this progress as much as I can, you can hit that subscribe button and follow along, and obviously ring the bell so you don't miss out. Comment if you want to give me any advice on airbrushing. Any other channels that you think that I might need to watch, feel free to let me know them. And yeah, and it's going to be cool. And obviously, check out my members and Patreon areas if that is what you want. And I will catch you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.